This is the story of a philosopher who, in his 30s, faced nothing but sorrow. One by one, he lost those closest to him. In 1563, his dearest friend Etienne de la Boétie died. A few years later, his father passed away. Then, in a tragic accident, his brother was struck by a ball and killed. He himself barely survived a near-fatal collision on horseback. And as if that weren't enough, his firstborn child lived only a few short months before passing away. The philosopher's name was Michel de Montaigne. Such relentless grief that this philosopher faced would break most people. It would lead to despair, to withdrawal from life. But Montaigne chose another path. Instead of being consumed by suffering, he examined it. And from his solitude, he gave the world Essais, a work that was more than just philosophy. It was a way of life, a guide to enduring misfortune without being destroyed by it. Montaigne wasn't a philosopher who built rigid theories or grand systems of thought. He was a thinker who observed, who questioned, who lived his philosophy. A skeptical Stoic, he didn't just write about resilience, he embodied it. His wisdom came not from abstract ideas, but from raw experience. As scholar Donald M. Frame pointed out, after losing his closest friend, Etienne de la Boétie, Montaigne felt an urgent need to communicate. Essais wasn't just a book. It was a conversation, a way to replace the friend he lost with a new one. The reader. Now let's explore Essais itself. Let's look at some of Montaigne's most profound insights. Lessons on how to live with more ease, more clarity, and perhaps even a little more joy. Michel de Montaigne spent his life challenging the arrogance of intellectuals. He distrusted rigid doctrines and absolute claims to knowledge, instead embracing a philosophy that blended Stoicism, skepticism, and Epicureanism. For him, philosophy wasn't about abstract theorizing, it was about living well. And at the heart of living well was learning to face death without fear. Montaigne draws on Cicero's claim that to philosophize is to learn how to die. At first glance, this may seem grim, but Montaigne saw it as liberating. Death is universal. Unlike poverty, illness, or misfortune, hardships that some may avoid, death is inescapable. If we spend our lives fearing it, we condemn ourselves to endless suffering. But if we confront it, reflect on it, and accept its inevitability, we free ourselves from its hold. This, according to Montaigne, is the true purpose of philosophy. Philosophy teaches us to detach from worldly concerns. It trains the mind to function independently of the body, a kind of rehearsal for death itself. The goal is not to become indifferent to life, but to strip away illusions, especially the illusion of permanence. By keeping death beside us, we free ourselves from excessive attachment to ambition, possessions, and future plans. We stop postponing life and begin fully embracing the present. Many distract themselves with work, entertainment, and ambition, as if denying mortality will somehow keep it at bay. But Montaigne warns that this avoidance only fuels deeper anxiety. Instead, he urges us to do as past societies did, keeping death visible in daily life. Ancient cultures placed burial sites in city centers, inscribed reminders of mortality at feasts and gatherings. They understood that accepting death as natural makes life more meaningful. For Montaigne, learning to die is ultimately about learning to live. Those who confront death directly, without illusion or denial, experience life most fully. When death is no longer feared, every moment becomes richer and more vivid. And he notes death is often less terrifying when it arrives than when it is merely imagined. The mind magnifies distant fears, but when the moment comes, many find themselves at peace. This aligns with the Stoic belief that suffering is often in our anticipation of events, not in the events themselves. Now, suffering is something we all endure. Life's highs and lows often lead to sorrow, and Montaigne was no stranger to it. Which brings us to his reflections on grief. Not being able to govern events, I govern myself and apply myself to them if they will not apply themselves to me. In his essay of sorrow, Montaigne challenges the idea that grief is a mark of wisdom or virtue. He finds it absurd that society often admires sorrow as a sign of depth, when in reality, it serves no purpose but to paralyze and torment. He recalls encountering a man who spoke endlessly about his sadness, convinced that his suffering made him profound. But Montaigne, rather than being moved, responded bluntly, "Now, I feel awful." His message was clear. Sorrow is not noble, nor does it enrich those who endure it. If anything, it spreads its weight onto others, offering no resolution or relief. Drawing from the Stoics, he argues that excessive grief is not a strength, but a weakness. He illustrates this through the story of Samanitis, the Egyptian king who watched his daughter enslaved and his son executed with stoic indifference, only to weep at the sight of an old friend's misfortune. Montaigne sees this as proof that overwhelming sorrow stuns the soul, silencing expression until it bursts forth in unexpected moments. He presents similar anecdotes. A prince who endured the deaths of two brothers but broke down over the loss of a servant. The myth of Niobe, turned to stone by uncontainable grief. Even great joy, Montaigne notes, can be deadly. Pope Leo VI, for instance, is said to have died upon hearing the victorious news of Milan's conquest. The weight of intense emotion, whether joy or sorrow, can render a person immobile, even lifeless. For Montaigne, resilience is not about suppressing grief, but about preventing it from overtaking reason. He does not argue that we should feel nothing, but rather that we should master our emotions before they master us. Sorrow is an unavoidable part of life, but indulging in it only deepens suffering. Instead of letting it consume us, Montaigne urges us to accept hardship without surrendering to despair. But what is it that truly holds us back from moving forward? More often than not, it is fear. And that is what I will discuss now. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Montaigne regarded fear as the most disruptive of all human emotions. He observed that fear can completely overthrow reason and judgment, sometimes even leading people to madness. He recounts several historical examples, including soldiers who, overwhelmed by terror, mistook harmless objects for threats or acted in ways that directly endangered themselves. Fear, Montaigne argues, is often more unbearable than actual misfortune. People tormented by the fear of loss, exile, or enslavement often suffer more than those who actually endure these hardships. Some, unable to cope with their fears, even take their own lives to escape the constant anxiety. He warns that fear strips people of their courage and willpower, rendering them incapable of facing the very dangers they dread. Even on the highest throne in the world, we are still sitting on our ass, Montaigne writes. This observation carries two lessons. First, it reminds us of humility. No matter how powerful or successful we become, we remain human. Second, it emphasizes equality. Since we all share the same fundamental existence, why waste energy fearing what is beyond our control? Montaigne critiques how people allow small fears to dictate their happiness, an idea closely tied to his reflections on the unpredictability of life, which I will explore next. Montaigne explores the idea that true happiness cannot be judged until a person's life is fully completed. He references the famous story of King Croesus, who, upon facing execution, recalled Solon's wisdom. No man should be deemed happy until his final day has passed, for fortune is unpredictable and can change in an instant. Montaigne reinforces this argument with historical examples of once mighty rulers who ended their lives in disgrace, captivity, or ruin, highlighting the fragile nature of success. He observes that fortune often seems to wait until the last moment to overturn a lifetime of achievements, proving its ability to erase years of prosperity in a single stroke. However, Montaigne argues that Solon's lesson extends beyond material wealth. True happiness, he believes, is not about external success, but inner tranquility, strength of character, and a well-ordered soul. The final moments of life, he suggests, reveal a person's true nature, stripping away pretense and exposing whether one has lived with wisdom and virtue. For Montaigne, happiness is not reserved for the powerful or the famous. It is a matter of mindset, the force that governs our lives. We start, tremble, turn pale, and blush as we are variously moved by imagination. Imagination is an active force capable of shaping experiences, affecting health, and altering the body itself. This is what Montaigne illustrates with anecdotes. Pregnant women imprinting their thoughts onto their unborn children. Individuals experiencing physical symptoms purely due to belief, and even animals influencing others with their gaze. He connects imagination's power to psychosomatic effects, citing cases where people have fallen ill, died from fear, or overcome physical limitations through sheer belief. While Montaigne remains skeptical of supernatural claims, he acknowledges that the mind's power to convince itself is strong enough to create real effects. He contrasts his speculative approach with traditional historians who focus solely on factual events, arguing that plausible stories can be just as valuable for understanding human nature. He also questions whether philosophers and theologians who rely on second-hand accounts can truly capture history with accuracy. Ultimately, he admires Plutarch's ability to present historical examples that inspire virtue, suggesting that historical truth is less important than the moral lessons these stories provide. Through this, Montaigne reminds us that our perception of reality, whether shaped by fear, fortune, or imagination, is often as powerful as reality itself. I study myself more than any other subject. This is my metaphysics, that is my physics. For Montaigne, solitude is often a wiser path than public life, where ambition and greed frequently lead people astray. He dismisses the common justification that individuals enter public service for the greater good, suggesting that most seek power and wealth for personal gain rather than for the benefit of society. Drawing from history and philosophy, he demonstrates how exposure to corruption can be dangerous, even for those with the best intentions. He notes that even the wisest men have often preferred solitude, as it allows them to escape vice, distraction, and the pressures of society. However, Montaigne warns that simply retreating from the world does not guarantee peace of mind. The burdens of ambition, fear, and desire follow us wherever we go, even into monasteries or the most secluded retreats. True solitude, he argues, is not merely physical isolation, but an internal state of freedom from these mental disturbances. He advises individuals to cultivate self-sufficiency, detaching from external attachments such as wealth, reputation, and even the expectations of family and society. Montaigne admires historical figures like Stilpo and Paulinus, who remained unshaken in the face of loss, because their happiness was rooted not in material possessions, but in their inner selves. He believes that true contentment comes not from the external world, but from the ability to turn inward, to build an inner sanctuary where one can find peace regardless of external circumstances. But solitude does not mean complete disengagement. While some throw themselves into work, study, or religious devotion to escape worldly distractions, Montaigne argues that the best path is a balanced one, pursuing only those activities that genuinely contribute to inner tranquility. Retirement from public life should not be an escape from responsibility, but a deliberate retreat into self-mastery, where validation is no longer sought from others, but from within. It reminded me of a philosopher who lived in the woods for 2 years, and I've already made a video about him. Give it a go. I'm sure you'll love it.